a terrific turnout for a very special person. I have to admit, I kind of feel a little bit of a kindred spirit here with Jan. Jan's certainly an accomplished artist, and I have someone very close to me, my wife, who's an artist, and Jan is a long-term teacher. My wife is a long-term teacher. Jan has battled cancer. My wife, who's hasn't battled cancer, but her family members have, her brother, and she was a bone marrow transplant for her brother. Perfect match.
Oh, wow.
So certainly, and my wife, who's an artist, also a sculptor, and she, as Jan has a very, very special sculpture here tonight that talks about his journey. And she recently made a sculpture for the Wounded Warriors, which is actually going into Bethesda Hospital. So there's a connection here, and Jan has touched many, many people's lives. 29 years as a teacher, now in Greenawalt, his years at the tutorial center, being a volunteer, and certainly tonight's turnout is a reflection of the type of person he is and the lives that he's touched. And we are very, very grateful to have him and his generosity and his bringing his spirits and zeal to our institution to help the many patients who come through these doors here. And this is a special center. We have our physician leaders here tonight. I see Charlene back here, Ives, and I know Ryan Howard's to my left, and I know Matt Vernon's here, and our team of cancer specialists who fight a very difficult disease. So Jan gives us all inspiration, and I think we're blessed to have him here and for his generosity and his spirit. So I'd like to introduce someone that you all know well, and I'd like to have him say a few comments.
Some vitally important people and groups who have helped me so poignantly in getting me here to this day. Here's especially to Dr. Ryan Howard, oncology, Dr. Scott Rogie, cardiology, Dr. David Sishi, internal medicine. And of course, to their respective physician assistants, nurses, pharmacists, technicians, and staff. Here's to my dear doctors Algus, Bennington, Cavalli, Cohen, Dobson, George, Minch, Reynolds, Rosenthal, Sarcino, Silverstein, Tock, Yuck, and so many others. And they were in alphabetical order. To the doctors, nurses, and staff on the east and west wings, ER, radiation, cardio rehab. To my many physical therapists, to my very special multiple myeloma support group partners, to the International Myeloma Foundation, and to the Southwestern Vermont Medical Center Healthcare Foundation, who is responsible for this happening this evening. These are all my medical families who sustain me. And you all know what family means. So to my dear family, my dear friends and caregivers who sustain me. And here's to some of my defeated heroes. Rosalie, Lola, Sherry, Viola, Juliana, Al, and Tommy, who died far too early in life. A former student. Can you help me get that second sheet? You're braver than you believe, and stronger than who you seem, and smarter than you think, said Christopher Robin to Boo. Multiple myeloma is a very individualistic cancer. It is manifested differently, and patients respond differently, both to the disease and to the treatment. Hence, every myeloma patient is different, and there is no set treatment that is good or right for everyone. This sculpture is part of my treatment and my response. With its oxymoronic, discordant harmony, the sculpture reflects my capacity to counter my cancer, as well as my effort to inspire others to do something beneficial on their own. May it continue to encourage and embolden all who behold it. Cancer may appear to be a formidable opponent. However, there is in each of us a consciousness and rapture that involves a psychological transfiguration, whereby we can shift our vision from the passing to the enduring. That gets translated in our experience and artistic expression. Using the words of someone else, art is a supremely individual expression. It doesn't ask permission. It doesn't take an exit poll and adjust accordingly. I believe that artists express what they know to be their own truth and beauty. In the words of Deirdre Flynn Sullivan, a marvelous artist in spirit, who I think is among us this evening, whom I first knew as a high school student, oh, so many years ago. Sorry, Deirdre. She says, each of us has energy to burn, confidence to maintain, verve to use, smiles to share, empathy to feel, kindness to give, and happiness to make. None of this is possible without love. From The Wizard of Oz, someday I'll wish upon a star and wake up where the clouds are far behind me, where troubles melt like lemon drops away above the chimney tops. That's where you'll find me. And finally, from Ralph Waldo Emerson, write it on your heart that every day is the best day of the year. I say from my heart, thank you, enjoy, and go forth in love.
It was in my wife Susan's and my studio that Jan made this beautiful sculpture. And so many of our student friends, Audrey and Helen and Leslie and Jan, they become colleagues to me rather than my students, but I call them my students. But we all work together, and Jan made this wonderful sculpture. I asked for an opportunity to talk tonight so I could tell you a little bit about Jan Bopp, Jan Martin Bopp. But I first want to say that I'm wearing a vest that Jan gave me for my birthday this year, and it's a Dana Farber Cancer Institute vest. I'm the most fortunate of people. I currently don't have cancer or heart disease as far as I know, but one never knows. But I wear this to honor Jan, but also I got to tell you, going to Dana-Farber with Jan as his health advocate and as another set of ears, what a place. There's people aren't nervous. They're not fussy. Well, the patients are nervous, but the people that work there, they know what they're doing. They're helping people to extend their lives, to lessen their pain, and it's an inspiration. I believe this institution must have the same serious purpose and just kind of a no crap, no bullshit attitude. We're here to help. So I'm very proud to wear this. I want to tell you that Jan was born and raised in Lansing, Michigan area. I don't know what the exact suburb. He attended Hope College as an undergraduate and went on to graduate studies at the Miami University of Ohio. If I get this wrong, he'll correct me later. And he was on a track to become to get a PhD doctorate in botany studies. And he has the kind of PhD degree that they call an EBD, which is everything but the dissertation. For various reasons, he got off track, never finished that dissertation, and we're going to jump next to Mount Greylock, where he started to teach in the early 70s. But I want to say also that Jan has two sons who are here now, Kevin and Steve. Each of them have two sons, and one of Steve's sons has a son. So Jan has 4 grandsons and a great-grandson.
5 grandsons.
They're just making more, Wesley. So I have to catch up. So 5 grandsons, pardon me. That's great. In 2000, Jan accompanied his close friend Patty Korzek to central China, where they met Patty's daughter, Kalina, and brought her back to Bennington. And Kalina is now a freshman at Mount Anthony High School. In 2005, Jan and Patty went back to maybe the same orphanage, but the same area, and met and brought back Sadie Korzek, who is a 4th grader, I think, but correct me if I'm wrong, at Sacred Heart School. Jan continues to be a very strong influence in Kalina and Sadie's lives. So he comes to Mount Greylock in the early 70s. He's teaching science in the middle school and the high school, and he teaches there for, I think Tom said, 29 years until he retires. But I just want to tell you one thing about that. In the early 80s, Jan was mentor to the Gay Straight Alliance high school group at Mount Greylock High School. Now, it wasn't very popular to be gay in the early 80s, and it was very hard, as you know, to be a young person discovering that they're gay. So Jan took on that responsibility. I think in his whole life, he helps people that maybe have gotten off track or maybe have struggled with the thing. So after something or other, after he retired from Mount Greylock, he went to work first at the Sunrise Family Resource Center and at the same time or soon after that at the Tutorial Center in Bennington. Tutoring students who have gotten off track, but he also participated in 3 significant programs. One was called Story Time with his dear friend and our dear friend Linda Dunnigan, where they tried to put books in the hands of every preschooler in Bennington, and also had a program on Cat TV where they read stories and people could watch them. our dear friend Michael Horowitz, who made the sculpture stand, this gorgeous walnut sculpture stand, made all the sets for that, and they're wonderful cartoon characters that he made up himself. So that was working at the tutorial center, story time. He also worked with a group called Father Time, which tried to get fathers and children together for activities once a month, father-daughter banquet and other things. And a significant program that he started with his colleague Jack Glade, who's the head of the tutorial center, and maybe other people, I'm sorry if I'm leaving you out, was called Bridge to College. And it's helped people who maybe didn't finish their high school for any number of reasons, teen mothers or people that had to take a job, or high school just wasn't working for them. He would help them get their GED and also teach them a college level course through the Community College of Vermont. This Bridge to College, maybe some graduates of that are here, but he's helped many people. So I'm trying to give you an idea of a person who helps people that are maybe not the top athlete or whatever, although I'm sure you'd be glad to help them too. And around 1998 or 99, I got a phone call from a guy who says, "Hello, my name is Jan Bopp. I'd like to hear you teach pottery classes." And I said, "Well, I think Jan Bopp and Ray Bubb ought to work together just so we can tell our names to each other, you know." He came to work, he participated, he made many functional pots, bowls, vases, plates, mugs, but he also started on this personal quest to make narrative sculpture, and this particular sculpture was completed around the time that Jan had his stem cell transplant. I believe it was in the fall of 2008 or 2009. But anyway, it tells the story of this. I just want to tell you one thing about a stem cell transplant in case you don't know. When you have the high-dose chemotherapy that kills all your bone marrow, the cells on the inside of your mouth all shed away as if you had a giant cold sore in your whole mouth and throat. It's a terrible, terrible, painful, but life-saving process. And you're very brave to go through it. And that's about all that I have to say. I just want to say Jan is a walking miracle of allopathic medicine, and just tell you one more little thing. Doctors always say, "I don't want you to die of my disease." You know, you can, if it's the heart doctor, it's like you could die of the, you know, I'm going to try to get you so you can die of something else. And they're all working as a team. And every time it's like, "I need you to take this Coumadin," but the oncologist is saying, "Well, that's too much Coumadin, you know, that's going to hurt this other thing and the other." It's just great, you know. And he would tell me stories of who's beating who in the contest of medications and treatments. So I thank you very much.
Many of you know Jan already as a teacher. To be a good teacher, you must be an interested and committed learner, someone willing to explore new subjects, often tackling material that can be difficult to understand or make sense of. That's where Jan and I intersect. Jan reached out to me. He was facing numerous medical challenges, one of which was melanoma. He had gone through treatment, as you've heard. Myeloma. I said, yes, myeloma. Thank you. I'll come back to that later. He's gone through many treatments, had a transplant, as you've heard, at Dana-Farber, and there was going to be more treatment. In fact, he fully understood that treatment would be part of his life forever. Part of his life, though, is the operative phrase. He was determined to live a full life. But that meant he would have to ask himself questions about how he wanted to live this life. He recognized the benefit of medical treatment had its side effects, which can limit energy and activities. There can also be psychological and emotional side effects of coping with a serious illness. And of course, Jan, as he always has been, is up to the task. He contacted me. As a psychologist at the Cancer Center since 1988, and that's a few years back, I had talked with many patients and their loved ones about coping with a cancer diagnosis. Understandably, there's often anxiety, fear, and depression associated with being a cancer patient. I consider these normal emotional responses, but they need attention as part of the care of the patient. In some cases, there are patients who experience a cancer diagnosis as an opportunity to look deeper and ask questions about the meaning of their lives and the path they would like to pursue, recognizing that the future is uncertain. As you would imagine, Jan is someone who is interested and motivated in exploring these issues and doing something about what he had learned through his personal experience with illness. He is committed to sharing his knowledge with other myeloma patients and has started, as someone had mentioned, a support group. He mentioned it, actually. In addition, and he's also been noted, he's very involved in the International Myeloma Foundation. Today, we are here to celebrate Jan's artistic gifts, but also to bring attention to myeloma, a type of cancer that not many people are aware of. Jan has told me, and I made this snafu myself, that people confuse the term myeloma with melanoma. Not the same, obviously. So now, you are once again seeing Jan, the teacher. With the support of the Cancer Center staff and Southwestern Vermont Medical Center, he has brought us together to educate the community about myeloma. He's here to teach us all, not only about a medical diagnosis, but about asking hard questions and facing challenges so we can live more fully with illness. And you continue to move yourself and help others progress from trauma to transcendence. Thank you, Jan. You're a really good teacher.
Thank you. I'm not sure this is actually working. Can people hear me with my regular voice? Okay. I came here in January of 2008, so a little over 6 years ago. Jan was one of my first patients. And when I met Jan had gone through his bone marrow transplant 2 months, 3 months prior to my meeting him. Jan, the transplant was what date?
November 2, 2008.
Okay, so right after, and I met you right after that. And Jan had gone through what a lot of people would consider the ultimate part of his treatment, and what a lot of people would consider to be the ultimate part of his journey. It turns out when we look over at the sculpture that actually that was the beginning of Jan's journey. The transplant was over, but there was a lot to come. Jan and I spent the first few years of our relationship dealing with what's represented in the sculpture, dealing with illnesses that we did not expect. Heart disease that came out of nowhere, some confusion issues that came out of nowhere, things that people go through when they go through an intensive therapy like that. His myeloma at that time was quiet. It was in remission. Everything was good. But he was suffering from a lot of complications, some of which had to do with his cancer, some of which had to do with other things. Jan gave me permission to talk about this. And we spent those years getting to know each other and beginning to deal with these problems that he was facing as part of his journey. And these are the things that Jan represented in his sculpture. And if one reads the description of it and the narrative of it, this is what took us through 2008, 2009, into 2010. And along the way, I learned a lot about Jan. I learned that he taught at this high school where my son went. We used to talk back and forth about the classes there and the teachers there and the interesting things that my son was encountering. And we developed quite a friendship. And then Jan began to talk about the things he wanted to do. He began to talk about the sculpture that he had completed that he wanted to bring in to show me. He began to talk about the support group that he wanted to create. And then Jan got shingles. And people here probably know what shingles is. But Jan didn't just get shingles. Jan got, I would say, the most outrageous case of shingles that I had ever seen, involving half of his face and his head, and pain medication. And I would say that for a good 12 months, Jan's transcendence was derailed by that process. And we worked through that, and his goals and his desires were put on hold. And I never got to see that part of Jan that he had been talking to me about for 2 or 3 years. About 1.5 years ago, everything started to come together in a positive way. Jan began to feel better. He began to get his health in order. He began to get his energy level in order. And he came back to me and he said, I want to talk to you about those things that we talked about before. I want to form this support group that I've been talking to you about for 2 or 3 years. I want to come in and show you that sculpture that I wanted to show you that represents this journey that I've been on. And these are hard things to do in a small community like this. Designing we have a hard time designing a breast cancer support group or a prostate cancer support group, let alone a support group for a disease where we only see 3 or 4 cases a year. So we encouraged Jan to do this. And to be honest, I had my doubts about how much he would be able to accomplish. And that's where I think people in this room that know Jan and have known him for longer than I are probably not surprised, but where I became very surprised by the person in the corner. Jan came in with me and he said, here, I want to form my support group. Here's the card I have. And he showed me a little paper card that he had designed himself with his name and his number, and he said, could you give these to myeloma patients? And we started that dialogue and we started that process. 2 or 3 months later, it was a laminated card. And it was a laminated card that had the International Myeloma Foundation logo up in the corner. And Jan had been off to Texas, and he had been off to International Myeloma Foundation workshops, and suddenly the cards were laminated and the logo was laminated. And then there was a flyer, and it was a paper flyer. And he said, can we put these up? And we stuck it in the little cardboard or the little corkboard booth there, and we put that up. And Jan began to get patients calling him. And then the flyer came back again, and it was laminated. And it said the International Myeloma Foundation up on the corner of it. And I said, something's happening here. And at that point, I went back and I thought about this. I had known Jan had always been a teacher. I had known he had always been one of my most inquisitive patients. I knew he was a self-advocate. And most importantly, I knew he always balanced these things: self-advocacy, teaching, inquisitive questions, with a respect. And not just a respect for himself, his other patients, but also for his providers and also for his community. And I began to realize that those character traits were what was driving this process forward. So Jan came in and he brought this sculpture in about 1 year ago, and I was amazed. You know, I'm people who know me. I'm an art collector. I saw this, and I was unfathomably impressed by this. And within the same visit, Jan said, "I want to give this to the Cancer Center," and I was floored, and I realized this was a selfless act by this person whose advocacy for the community was accelerating. So we graciously accepted it, and over the last several months, Jan has built this evening. And not only has he built this evening, but he has advocated for this in a way that I've never seen before. Since we heard about this project 6 months ago, this sculpture has appeared in the International Myeloma Foundation's blog, on newsletters. I get emails from the International Myeloma Foundation where I've seen this sculpture coming to me via email that it's being donated to SVMC. And it's really represented by the fact that all of you are here tonight. I mean, this is a turnout for a cancer center like this that rivals what we see on Cancer Survivors Day. And this turnout is obviously on behalf of the night of donating the sculpture, but it's really on behalf of a wonderful, incredible advocate. And what this journey shows us is it's not only a journey for one individual person, but it's a journey that shows what a self-driven, community-oriented, wonderful advocate can do for a place like ours. So I just want to thank Jan tremendously for this evening, for this donation, and for his support amongst all these years.
Can someone boost me up?